Hi, I'm Dan Schmitt. I do a weekly television show called Team Chicago Challenge. My website is teamchicago.tv, teamchicago.tv. We're here at Donaldson's Motorcycle Shop. We're about 20 miles northwest of downtown St. Louis. We're in St. Anne, St. Louis. This was the home of Neil King. Neil King was one of the top motorcycle racers at Santa Fe Speedway, and I learned quite a bit about motorcycle racing from Neil King. We come here every year to honor Neil King and to thank Donaldson for putting this party on. Today I had the opportunity to talk to Ronnie Jones. Ronnie Jones, one of the top motorcycle racers, one of the top flat trackers racers in the 1970s into the 80s, into the 90s. He still races, tries to qualify for the mile at Springfield. He's still a very competitive guy. In the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk to Ronnie Jones. We're going to talk about his racing career, and I think this is very interesting. So pay attention and learn something about this great motorcycle racer, Ronnie Jones. And my website is teamchicago.tv. As we look at this bronze statue of Neil King racing his Gold Star, we are here to honor Neil King, the godfather of flat track racing, the godfather of short track racing. We're also looking at a photo from the Blackwater Enduro. This is Carl Donaldson. Carl, his wife, and his daughter, Kim King, are hosting this party to honor Neil King. As we see Carl talking to Keith Mashburn, we're going to go back to 1987 to see Ronnie Jones racing at the Springfield Mile.
And we're underway. Has got a good start out of the inside, but it's Scotty Parker on the outside who grabs the early advantage. Parker puts the factory entry out front. Parker grabbing the whole shot. Missed by just 5/1000ths of a second of taking the fast time. Ricky Graham is right there with him. Pete Hames moves up the inside. Tight battle up front. Drafting up into the middle of it is Ronnie Jones. On the tail end of that five-rider pack is Jay Springsteen. This one should be something to see, ladies and gentlemen. Put Parker in a Honda Sandwich up the front straightaway. It was a Honda Sandwich, and Scott Parker was the meat when they got to turn one. Parker just held it on a little bit longer and said, guys. And his Harley Davidson pulls him out onto the backstretch with the lead. Look at that three-rider battle down the backstretch. Jones had the lead for a moment. Parker goes by on the outside. Graham goes by on the inside, and Graham comes out of it with the lead. It is dead even at the white flag, and this is it. One more lap. Down they move. He'll try to set up a draft pass on Scott Parker up the front straightaway. Parker can do nothing now. It's just a question of whether Graham's got enough draft to get past him. Here they come for the finish. Graham will go to the outside. It is Graham.
Well, I didn't run away with it like I like to do here at Springfield, but the racetrack it's got a real narrow groove on it. I tried to ride up high and ride like I usually do, and it just didn't work. I started going backwards, so I just went down to the groove like everybody else and started racing with Ronnie Jones and Scott Parker, and then it was just a matter of...
I was in the lead there for a little bit. Got a little bit high going into two and got off the groove and lost some time. I'll try not to make that mistake again in the main event.
In Springfield this afternoon.
It is the top three from the heat races that make it directly into the final. And now let's check out the action. Final event. These scenes are from Dave Despain's 50th anniversary Springfield Mile, 1987.
As they come down for lap one. Give Doug Chandler a call. Doug Chandler was the other rider in the... Oh, Schobert off the groove. Bubba Schobert slipped off the groove at turn one. Schobert pitched her in too hard. It slipped. He went wide. And now here comes the battle for fourth up that front straightaway. Hank Scott, Scott Pearson, Ronnie Jones, Terry Poovey, and Tim Mertens. Mertens has been fourth. He's been fifth, sixth, seventh, back in eighth. They are scrambling the deck here. Parker is pulling away. They're coming down to the final lap. The question is whether Schobert is letting him go, whether Schobert is setting him up for the draft on the final lap. Parker has a solid margin. This is it. Final run to the checkered flag. Here they come to the finish. Scott Parker has won the Springfield Mile.
Parker claimed an inspired victory. On the cool-off lap, the front runners exchanged a variety of hand signals, Parker being congratulated, fist in the air, but Hank Scott and Ronnie Jones seem to have their own little discussion going.
Winner, he's coming up the front straightaway, and he is the happiest man perhaps in the history of Springfield, Illinois, ladies and gentlemen. If you're a Scott Parker fan, if you're a Harley fan, if you're just a plain old race fan, share this moment of celebration with Scotty Parker.
And now another look at that backstretch incident on the cool-off lap. Right behind Parker and Scott Pearson, Hank Scott and Ronnie Jones are seriously at odds over the outcome of their battle for 5th place. Jones beat Hank off the final turn, but Hank obviously feels he was wronged in that swap of positions, and he's letting Jones know about it in no uncertain terms. Ronnie, meanwhile, says, "Hey, what'd I do?" Parker completes his victory lap and is welcomed home by Willie Werner. The man who
was Ronnie Jones taking 5th place at the 50th anniversary Springfield Mile 1987, and now we're going to talk to Ronnie Jones.
Woman wearing a T-shirt that reads, "I'm Scotty Parker's #1 fan." Her loyalty is...
When I was about 10 years old, had a cousin that got a motorcycle, and he happened by my house and was showing it off, and I thought it was really cool, and I thought, boy, I'd sure like to get me something and like that, and I'd always go to, at that time there was Montgomery Ward's, and I'd always spend all my time while my parents were there hanging out in the automotive department looking at the little Briggs & Stratton mini bikes. And so after my cousin came by on the motorcycle, I convinced my parents to get me one of those little Briggs & Stratton mini bikes. And about that same time, there was a movie that came out about motorcycles, and it just happened to coincide with my sudden newfound interest in motorcycles, and so I talked to my parents and let me go see it. And as it turned out, I ended up just having them drop me off there, and they would leave me there every Saturday and let me watch it 3 or 4 times, and then I'd call them and they'd come get me after I'd watched it about 4 times.
So where was this, at a theater or some motorcycle? And they played on any Sunday?
On any Sunday. It was on at the theaters.
Right.
Yeah, it was on at the theaters in Oklahoma City. And so I would, after I watched it the first time with my parents, I made them take me back and just drop me off. Found out the first one that was showing in the day was about noon on a Saturday, and so if I stayed all day, I could watch it 4 or 5 times. And so they picked me up at 10 o'clock. So that's what I did. So I knew every word about, but the thing that came out about the movie, of course, was it opened my eyes to all the different forms of motorcycling that were out there that I had no idea about. But it also let me know that there was a guy named Mert Lawwell who bought a nice house in Tiburon, California, which is Marin County, which is one of the highest priced real estate in the country, and he made his living racing motorcycles. And I swear it was at that time, sitting there watching that movie, that I decided that that's what I was going to do when I grew up. I was going to make my living racing motorcycles, and I know my parents figured I'd outgrow that, and thought that I would move on, and do something else. I'd always made great grades in school, and I think they thought it'd just be kind of a passing fad, but I never wavered from it. It was something I kind of always knew I was going to do, and I never really thought about doing anything else.
Okay, so first race, how did you finally get to a racetrack?
Well, what happened was I got that mini bike and I started riding around my house and fields, and there were other kids riding in that area, and I got to talking to one kid, and he said, "Oh yeah, I race," and he was actually younger than me. He was about 8 years old, I think. And he said, "I race," and I said, "Really, where at? Where do they run the races?" And he told me, and so I got to start going out and watching this kid.
So you got your parents to take you?
My parents to actually, to take me to the races, and I got to be good friends with this kid. And after a year or so of watching him race every week, I ran into his father at the local motorcycle shop that we hung out at. That was a Yamaha shop, and he told me that his son had gone to his grandmother's in Colorado. He was out of town, and that his motorcycle was just sitting there, and said, "If you want to race it, you know, I'll let you ride it. So I ran home, wouldn't talk to my dad because I knew he'd say no. He was at work, so I didn't talk to him. I talked to my mom, and without my dad knowing it, she said yes, and I went to the race with him that night. And
So you went with the guy that had the bike, and your mom gave you permission.
My mom gave me permission to ride. My dad didn't know anything about it. He would have said no, I'm sure. But my mom knew he would say no, and she could tell how bad I wanted to do it, so she allowed me to go with the guy's name was Richard Webb, and let me go with him to the races, and I ended up getting 4th. And as it turns out, that night in that mini bike class, they only gave 3 trophies. So I missed out on a trophy by 1 spot. And it turned out Richard, my friend, was gone for 2 weeks. And so I got to ride it the next week. And that week, I wanted so bad to get a trophy. And it must have shown because I got the whole shot. I led the first couple laps, and I was riding in that race a Yamaha Mini Enduro, a 60cc bike, and there's 2 kids that had these little Indians that mini bikes, and they were 75cc's, and they finally passed me on the straightaway, but I wound up getting 3rd and first 60.
So was this a short track or a scramble?
It was a quarter-mile short track in Yukon, Oklahoma, where Garth Brooks is from. It was a quarter-mile short track, and it was an oiled dirt surface. We loved those back growing up. Ross Downs, that I raced a lot at, was also an oiled surface. But yeah, I got a trophy, and that's where trouble hit with Dad, because I had that trophy and I couldn't hide the trophy. And so when he came home from work after the second race, the second week, he wanted to know what that was, and and so when he found out that I'd raced, his first response was that he was going to go kick the ass of the guy, Richard Webb, that had let me ride his bike at the races. And after talking him down a little bit, talking to him for a while, he kind of calmed down, and he was kind of like, "Oh, so you won a trophy, huh?" And so after that, it wasn't so much trouble, and ultimately it was probably another, several months, maybe even the next season, before I actually talked him into buying me my own bike, which happened at that point.
So how old were you here? 11?
I was 11, and then I think when I was turned 12, I actually was able to. Had a paper route and worked at a car wash near my house, and I was saving my money, and I bought another guy that was turning pro. He had a 125 and a 250, and he was selling the 125 so he could turn pro, and so I bought the 125, and that was really my first race bike.
So then you got into running the local amateur stuff. How many different racetracks did you run in the Oklahoma area back then?
Initially, when I first started racing, there was one track, Yukon, that I raced at every week on Saturday nights, and I was, each week I could see the improvement. I was getting more and more competitive, and it didn't take long before I was winning the 125 class, the amateur class. And of course, my brother, who also, he was a year younger than me, he was riding with me and stuff, but he wasn't racing. And so I had the 125 Yamaha that I'd bought, and got to where I was, like I said, winning the 125 amateur class, and we were racing mainly just there. Now, at least in the summer. During the winters, we had the promoter would run an indoor series in Harrah, Oklahoma, that was not very far away, and we would run that track every Saturday night. So for the first year or so, I pretty much raced at Yukon in the summer and Harrah in the winter.
And you're running a paper route, and you're basically financing all this yourself.
Yeah, it was, for the most part, my parents, my mom especially, would help wherever she could, but, we didn't have a lot, and they worked hard, and I had a brother, too, and a sister, and my brother also had a bike, and my sister took dance classes, and so it wasn't easy, but somehow we managed to make it, and we started getting I started getting a little bit of support, and actually a motorcycle shop, it was a Hodaka shop, was impressed with what I'd done, and they wanted me on their bike, so I actually went back for a year from the 125 to 100, but it was a very competitive Hodaka, and I won almost every race. If it didn't blow up, I won almost every race on that bike, but they finally, Hodaka went out of business, and they were frustrated trying to keep the thing together, so I'd sold the Yamaha at that point, and so I went looking for another bike, and there was a guy in Tulsa that built really fast motorcycles, a guy named Corky Story, and almost everybody in Tulsa either rode a K&N Yamaha or a bike built by Corky Story, and he had a Suzuki 125 that he wanted to sell, and so I bought that bike and started racing that in the 125 expert class, and started running near the front and started to win a little bit, and me and my brother, who like most brothers used to fist fight all the time, we got in a fight, and I went to take a swing at him, and he ducked his head. I hit him right on the top of the head and broke my hand, broke my right hand. So I couldn't race, and so strangely enough, I asked David if he wanted to race my bike. So he got his first race, you know, while I was out with a broken hand. He got his first race. He rode the 125 amateur class, I think 4 weeks while I had a broken hand. I was off 4 weeks, and he won all 4 weeks in a row. So when I got healthy again, I didn't have the heart to not let him ride the bike. So we had one race bike. He'd ride in the 125 amateur class, hop off of it, and I'd jump on it and ride the 125 expert class. And we kind of did that for a while, and somehow we managed to scrape up enough money to get him a bike. He bought a Suzuki from Corky Story, the same guy, and it wasn't long before he was racing the 125 expert class against me, and going, you know, we were only a year apart, but he was probably more talented actually than I was. I think I just wanted it a little more, but he certainly had the talent, and so he was pretty soon we were racing together in the 125 expert class, and we did that for a couple of years before 1975. Bull Taco had come out with the Astro, and I didn't have the money to buy one.
Because they were $1,000, weren't
they
something?
Were 1,200. Let's see, they were $1,345 was the suggested retail on a 250 Astro, and the dealer there, the local dealer, said that he would let me have one for $1,250. That was about $100 off of a $1,300 motorcycle, which is pretty good. And my mom didn't have the money, so she said, well, we're going to have to go to the bank. So I was 14 years old. She took me to the bank and said, at that time, that was when you actually banked with your banker. You knew your banker. Your banker was Mike. You know, he knew your name too. And so she took me in there and she said, well, Ronnie wants to buy a motorcycle. And he didn't have enough money. He says, well, what does he got? She said, well, he's paper route. He saved $150. He's paper route, and the money he's made racing in the expert class, making money on his 125. And he said, so you need $1,200, basically. And she said, yeah. And he said, okay, well, he's 14. I can't make the loan to him. But she said, I can put the loan in your name and put his name on the note also. And that way he can be establishing some credit at 14 years old, before Dodd-Frank and all the other crap. So, you know, so she said, look, Mike, I got to tell you, I don't have the money to pay for this. He's going to have to pay for it. And he says, okay, I understand, Mary. So every month, you know, the first $100 I made racing in my paper route, whatever, I would set aside, and she would take me down to the bank every month, first every month. Mike could see me walking in, and he'd know why I was coming, and he'd say, hey, Ronnie, how you doing? I was 14 years old. I'd walk up and hand him $100. And so after I paid that thing off, you know, in a year, when I turned 18 and wanted to buy a van, I didn't even need a cosigner. I went to Mike, and he said, whatever you want. But anyway, so I got the Bull Taco, and that kind of got me, I started off in the expert class, you know, right away on that. I think the first race I rode it, I got second. I think I won the second week on it, and at that time the guys that I was having to race against were guys like Randy Cleek and Phil McDonald, and they were racing.
So they were running at that time in the expert class, amateur racing, right?
Yeah, they were riding. You know, Randy Cleek and Phil McDonald. Those guys would ride in the 125 expert class, the 250 expert class, and the 360 expert class. They had bikes for every class. I just had. I think at that point, I think I'd may have sold the 125 Suzuki. I may have ridden it for a little while. I may have kept that for a little bit longer, but that Bull Taco I won a lot of races on, and by that time I was about 14, 15 years old. We started doing a little bit of traveling to Texas. We'd go down to Ross Downs and race, where I went I think to Ross Downs 2 times in 1975. on that motorcycle.
So was your
maybe
dad on
76.
board by this time?
Yeah, but
Sorta?
yeah, my dad was on board, but my parents divorced, and so we lived with our mom, and so she was much more involved than he was. He paid child support and all that stuff, but he wasn't really involved with our racing. So it was kind of up to us to make sure that we managed the money and could pay for everything. And so we started going though. We had some friends that traveled, and they kind of understood our situation and would let us load in with them and go to the races. And so we ended up going a couple times to Ross Downs that season, and at the time Freddie Spencer was kind of the hotshot guy. He was actually outrunning all of the pros, Terry Poovey and Mike Kidd and everybody at Ross Downs, and he was just about, I think I was 15, I think he was 14. He's a year younger than I was. He was the same age as David. And so when I went down
most
there,
people don't know if Freddie Spencer is a flat tracker.
Freddie Spencer
mainly
was a
is
flat
a
tracker,
right,
yeah,
right.
just like most great road racers from America. They all started out, in dirt track, and Freddie was one of those. But he had just been signed by Bull Taco, and there was actually, when I went down there, there were two people from Spain, from Bull Taco, that were actually there at the track watching him. And in fact, there's a picture. Set of his leathers sitting right next to me, just out of your camera shot. Those were the leathers that Freddie was actually wearing that night when I raced.
So he had factory Taco leathers. So he was as big in Texas as Garth Brow and them guys up here in Michigan.
Probably more so.
Right,
Freddie was was really the star for Bull Taco, and so. The first time I'd ever been to Ross Downs, he won the 360 class that night, which was really the class where all the pros were typically in, Mike Kidd and Terry Pook, and he won that class, but I promptly went out and spanked him. And his dad was very upset that I had outrun Freddie in front of the Bull Taco representatives, and so he came running over and wanted to have a match race. And he wanted the match race to be with me and Freddie and one of Freddie's buddies, Rusty Patillo. And the guy that I'd gone down with, who was actually the people that had taken me down, was my girlfriend's father. And he said, no, he says, we've already raced, we won, And so his dad wanted to know, you coming back next week? And we didn't know, and we said, well, we don't know. We'll maybe be down again sometime in the summer. And we left, and actually, before the summer ended, maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks later, we had another opportunity to go down. We went down again, and I beat Freddie again. And
in the 250 class.
In the 250 class,
right.
right.
With your Bull Taco.
With my Bull Taco.
Now, was anybody helping you with the Bull Taco?
My girlfriend's father, the guy that drove me down there.
Right.
Because I wasn't able to drive.
So he would help with doing the top end, check the rings
all
and
the stuff.
really? So he was a real nice guy, huh?
He was a super nice guy. His name was Houston Bibb, and he taught me, more about working on the bikes and how to race and focus and things like that. And so, but I beat Freddie the second time, and from then on, his dad was realized the first time wasn't a fluke, and he was always very, very nice to me after that. He was always. He wasn't. He was upset the first night, but after the second night we came back and beat him again. He was very nice, very humble to me, and Freddie and I, in fact, to this day, still joke about it. I ran into him in the last year or so, and we laugh about it.
Okay, so then when did you get pro? Did you get your license, novice license at 16?
Yeah, at 16.
Right.
So the following year, I was going to turn 16. I was intended to become a novice professional. So I wasn't sure that the Bull Taco would be fast enough. So I saw the kind of the handwriting on the wall. All of the guys that I talked to, Randy Cleek, and the guys that I look up to in the area, all said I really needed to get a Yamaha 250. And Randy was riding a Star Racer frame bike, and Randy was my hero. And so
that's right. He did have a Star Racer, not a champion.
No. Randy Cleek was sponsored by Star Racer, Larry Kennedy, and so Randy was able to help me get a little bit of a deal on one, and I found a Yamaha that I could buy and take the engine out of,
so it was a 73, 74.
It was a 75 MXB, Yamaha MXB.
Right. Which were great engines.
Yeah, great engines. And so we bought that, and I put that together my novice year and went out and took off actually went to Daytona, was my first race, and I went with Randy Cleek.
And what was Randy at this
March
time?
of 1977. He had finished 5th in the AMA Grand National standings the year before.
So he was an expert.
He was an expert.
Randy was an expert by
he
then.
Finished 5th the prior year, and I think the 4 guys he finished behind were Kenny Roberts, Gary Scott, Steve Eklund was 4th that year, and 3rd was I think who was in that group there. Now he was 5th, whatever whoever the 4 were. I think Kenny, Gary, Eklund, and it'll come to me. But so, you know, Randy was a top racer, and this was March of '77, and he took me to Daytona. I got 2nd down there in the novice race.
You ran the novice only race when there was how many were there?
It was like 275 riders.
Riders, and you had to win your heat.
Had to win everything.
Yes,
you know,
right.
Even,
you couldn't,
it was you know,
insane.
So, yeah, 12 guys made the main event out of the 280 or so guys, and I ended up getting 2nd. I was the first 2 strokes, kind of I guess you know, a precursor of things to come. The kid that beat me was a kid named Brian Bernard out of Michigan. He was a good ice racer and had a 4-stroke Honda. Had a Honda 4-stroke, and it was that thing just would get hooked up on that slick stuff.
So that's with the old stadium.
Old Memorial Stadium that was at the college.
Right.
And so yeah,
with the football field in the center.
Right. And Randy, you know, had been very helpful leading up to that race, and in fact took me to Daytona my novice year. And a month later, he was killed in a car accident in Italy at I think it was after Imola. I don't know if it was after the transatlantic match.
When he was road racing by then.
He was a very good road racer.
Yes.
In fact, he was the U.S. road race champion the previous year.
Right.
And he had. Coming home from the track, he and Kurt Kiefer from Bel-Ray and an Italian mechanic were killed in a car accident. And very sad day. Randy was a good friend and mentor to me, but I finished the rest of that year, my novice year, being the number 2 novice.
So did you ever travel to Santa Fe at that time, or?
My first year as a novice, yeah, I was able to race Santa Fe 6 times as a novice, and I won all 6 races. I won every single race in 1977.
No, was that a combined then, or was that?
No, that was, they kept the
They already separate.
Combined,
Right, novice separate. Right.
During that season, I also raced in Granite City every week, and they a couple of times did combine the novice, junior, and expert, and I had a 3rd place finish. I think Rick Hocking won the race, but I finished 3rd. I was the top novice that season. But I did race Santa Fe 6 times out of the, I don't know if they ran 12 or 15 races that year. You know, I was only able to make 6 of them, but I was undefeated that year, and finished 2nd in the nation that year, my novice year, racing around as much as I could get to the races. Being from Oklahoma, I would, you know, if I needed to work on the bike, I would sometimes go back to Oklahoma and then come back. But Charlie Roberts beat me, and of course he by a 1.5 I think that year, and he never lets me live that down. Still,
Charlie Roberts was the top novice.
Charlie Roberts is the top novice in the nation over myself, Wayne Rainey, Tommy Duma. You know, I kid Charlie a lot about it, and I'll tell you for the purposes of this tape. You know, the reality was I think AMA kept records, and I scored a 1.5 less than Charlie. I raced in 36 races, and Charlie raced in 52. So Charlie, if you're watching this, don't forget that. You had about 15 more races than me, bud, so you only won by a 1.5. So, you know.
And you could also point out that short track were they paying full points by then, or still half points?
Half points.
Yeah,
half points,
okay.
Yeah. And so Charlie lived in Illinois, and the races.
He could run more half miles.
He could run everywhere all the time.
How many half miles did you run that year, or just mainly all short track?
Probably half, you know, probably half of what the races of the 36 races that I raced, probably 15, 16, 17 were half miles, and maybe 18, and
the rest was short track, right?
Yeah, and Charlie was doing, of course, all those short tracks too. In fact, I think Charlie might have been the Santa Fe track champion that year, even though he never beat me at Santa Fe when I was there, but he ran all the races, and so I think he just edged Mike Gilkey for the novice championship.
Very good. All right, so now you turned junior. What was your plan?
I had a, the deal was you had to have a Harley, and so I had a buddy that lived in Oklahoma that owned a jazz club, strangely enough, that was a big race enthusiast, and he went out and found an XR750 down in a guy named John Apple was down in Houston, and we bought that thing and put it together, and I rode that thing with somewhat limited success. I don't think I won a half mile as a junior until about August. The first 750 race that I won was at Knoxville in Iowa, and I think it was about August. After I won that race, so then I kind of went on.
So you're still short tracking also?
Still short tracking on the
right.
On the still
so you could make some money.
Yamaha,
So you run, but you would run Granite City every week. Is that
yeah,
what?
yeah.
Okay.
I was running Granite City every week that we were in the area, and,
Right.
and we go from there to Santa Fe. Every week we
Right.
could, and we tried to make all those races every week because it was extra money we could use it, and so we did that. And then, but I had the 750 and was early in the season we were running a TT at Bridgeton, Michigan, and going in the first turn, a kid named, I think it was Mike Hart. His last name was Hart, I remember that. But he ran up my leg and broke it. And so I missed.
At Bridgeton, at the TT.
Bridgeton, yeah, in the first turn of the heat race.
I could have probably been there that
Yeah,
day.
you probably were. And so I missed 2 months, 8 weeks of racing while I healed up from June 15th, when that race was, till about August 15th. And so when I came back, I won Knoxville. And then I ended up, it was the way the series shook out and the way that the regional races ran. I think I only missed one, and so I still had a shot at winning the regional championship, and it all came down to final races. At the last regional of the year was in Oklahoma City, and they had two days, two regionals. And I ended up winning both days and beating Mike Rhodes.
On the half mile.
On the half mile. And beating Mike Rhodes for the regional championship by a point or two. It was very close. And so I ended up winning the regional championship and finishing 5th overall in the junior class. Trying to think, maybe Scott Parker maybe was the top junior that year. So the next year I became a rookie. Went to Houston, won my heat race and got
So they were still running the short track and the TT then?
They were still running the short track and the TT, but during the off season we had picked up a sponsor from Viper Frames in Illinois. They were in Champaign, Illinois, and they built a bike for me and a bike for David. And we went to Houston. David was a junior and I was a rookie, and I think David got second in the junior race, and I ended up being the top rookie that year and finishing 5th in the national. I won my heat and got 5th. My first year at Houston, and so at that point I was leading the Rookie of the Year thing, but Scotty Parker ended up going on and winning a couple of mile nationals at DuQuoin and Indianapolis, and taking that away from me. I think I got second that year, and I had a few other national.
Did you win any nationals that year?
Not as a
first year. But no, Scotty Parker did.
Scotty won 2, DuQuoin.
Now was he on the Vista Sheen stuff? Or
no, on the Klotz Wiseco.
Oh yeah, right.
And so, the following year, my sophomore season, I still was riding for Viper and had got a new XR750 and had Carl Patrick build the engine on it. And so I was pretty excited, and we went to Houston, and I didn't have a TT bike, so I had to borrow a TT bike, and it was a Honda from a guy named Bill Snyder in Kansas. And I made the main event on that, but fell off, and Scotty Parker ran over me, ran right up over the bike. There's pictures of that, with him going right over the bike and just missing me, luckily, because that 750 was, he was on a...
And he's on a 750 on that Astro. How did he do there?
Well, he made the main event, because it was in the main event that I fell. So
how did Scotty Parker do? Did he win that?
No, he never won.
Because it was tough with a big bike.
Yeah,
at the Astrodome.
Ricky Graham won. Those guys won on a twin against the singles. Ricky Graham was one of them.
Right.
But Ricky was phenomenal motorcycle racer. But so was Scotty, by the way. But I fell off, and so I had finished like 14th out of 14 in the TT, and Kenny Roberts had been trying his whole career to win the short track and the TT. He'd won both, but not in the same year. And he wanted that bad. He had won the TT the night before.
So Kenny was still coming back racing.
in 1980. It
Right.
was 1980. And yeah, he was wanting to really win that, do the doubleheader at Houston bad. He had won the TT the night before when I'd fallen down, and he got off the line first in the short track and looked like, you know, he was going to win it. And I was back in the field, 5th or 6th, and I was able to work through the field and catch him after about 5 laps. And for the rest of the race, he and I just went back and forth, you know, tooth and nail. And
In the short track.
In the short track.
At
Houston, yeah.
right. You and Kenny Roberts.
Yeah, and I ended up winning. It was my first national win. I was a
And
second
you
year
beat.
expert.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I beat Kenny.
So
and-
you were dialed.
Yeah, I was, you know, I was pumped up, and so I won, and Kenny was, we've been friends ever since. He, you know, I think he appreciated, you know, you think he'd be mad at me, and instead, you know, Kenny and I, you know, he even in fact offered me a ride the ride that my kid ultimately wound up getting and winning the championship that year on the Roberts Lawwell team. Mert Lawwell lobbied for kid, and so I ended up getting bumped. But Kenny had already called me and said, fly back here and come, you know, meet the team and stuff. That was in '81, the following year, after I beat him. You know, later that same season, my brother was killed at Louisville. Spectator, inebriated spectator, walked out on somehow managed to get out on the track and walked out in front of me and David, the whole pack, in the first heat race, and everybody was able to avoid him but David, and David laid the bike down when he saw him, and ultimately couldn't avoid him, and had internal injuries and died, and that kind of took the elation I'd felt early in the year when in Houston, you know, that kind of, all that went away, and didn't really know if I wanted to race again, and I sat around home for about a month, and after I'd won Houston, I'd had to ride that Honda that I'd borrowed from Bill Snyder, Yamaha, after I won the short track national on the Yamaha. Keith, you know, it was Kenny Clark at the time, said, hey, you can't ride that Honda, I'm gonna send you a bike. And so he sent me a new TT 500, and along with Harry Lilly and Jim Dewar from Megacycle and the people at Viper, we were in the process of building a motorcycle when David was killed. And so I called Delton at Viper and said, hey, I think I might come ride the Santa Fe TT race, and we need to get the Yamaha together. And he said okay, and he finished it up, and I came up. My mom agreed to come with me because you know, I knew she didn't want me to race, but she was, you know, said, I don't want you to, you know, I want you to live your life and do what you want to do. And I said, honestly, I don't really know what I want to do, but if I get on the bike, maybe I'll know. And I went to Santa Fe, and nobody expected very much, honestly, including myself. And I went out and lapped all the way to 3rd place. I won the main event. I think, you know, a lot of people that were there have come up to me over the years and said that they felt like they witnessed something supernatural. It wasn't, you know, they recognized that there was something going on there more than just, you know, a motorcycle race. And I felt the same way. It was kind of like I wasn't really in control. I was just being kind of used to steer the motorcycle. And I remember my kid, his bike had blown up in the main event, and he was down in the infield, and so he couldn't cross the track in front of the riders, so he was standing there watching, and I was so far in front, and I didn't know it. I never looked back. I didn't know what was going on, but I didn't feel like I was riding hard. Mike, every time I would come by, he was yelling at me and throwing his arms out wide, going, you've got a huge lead, slow down, slow down. And every lap he got more and more demonstrative. He just kept getting louder and louder and jumping higher and higher and telling me to slow down. And I was like, what is wrong with him? I'm not even riding hard. I'm going as slow as I can go. And you know, and I was going through the traffic, you know, as I went through lap riders all the way up to, I think Steve Eklund and Ricky Graham were 2nd and 3rd, and so I lapped all the way to 3rd. And you know, I felt like that was a sign that I was supposed to keep racing, and so that's what I did. And strangely enough, after winning that national and getting that great sign from God and my brother that I was supposed to go out and keep racing, I beat my head on the wall for 5 years, didn't win another national. Won a lot of, you know, non-national races and everything. Broke my leg in '83 at Daytona, but didn't win another national for 5 years. And there was a lot of times when I kept thinking, you know, what the hell kind of sign was that? You know, why'd you have me do this if I wasn't ever going to win again? And just about the time I was thinking that maybe, hey, it was time to move on to something else, I'd put in 5 years, trying to win, and I was about to walk away, and a couple from Illinois, from Champaign, Skip and Elaine Moret, people that were good friends, and had sat around in the shop and watched David and I work on the motorcycles, approached me in Peoria the year I was thinking, '84, the year I was thinking about retiring, and said, hey, we've been watching you, and we'd like to put together a program and take you racing next year and buy some Hondas and go racing. And that year I won the Ascot Half Mile National in 1985, and that's what sort of got me back on the winning, changed my view about, if I should stay in the sport, and ended up going on for another, that was 85, and raced full-time for another 10 years, won 10 nationals altogether, raced part-time from 96 through 99 before really retiring and starting a business. And even since starting that business from 2000, I've continued to ride an occasional national here and there, and have made main events all the way up until 2014 at Calistoga. I got 11, and so I'm the oldest guy that ever has made a national main event, passing Jay Springsteen by a couple years. So I've been waiting on him to come back out and knock me off, because he definitely could. He's that good. He could come back out right now and beat, make the main event. I'm certain of it. And same with Scotty Parker. So you guys, that could be, you all won lots of championships and more races, so that could be one record you could let me have. I'm not sure it's a record that you really want to own, being the oldest guy, but yeah, I'll claim it.
Thank you, Ronnie. A great rider and a great friend. One of the best ever. For more information on Donaldson Cycle, they're at 9851 St. Charles Rock Road, St. Anne, Missouri. Give them a call at 314-427-1204. And their website is donaldsoncycles.com. donaldsoncycles.com. Special thanks to Dave Despain and Associates for that great footage from the 50th anniversary Springfield Mile, May 1987. For more information on the movie On Any Sunday, go to their website, onanysundayfilm.com, onanysundayfilm.com. And if you want to get a hold of me, it is teamdan45@gmail.com. Don't forget teamchicago.tv, walkwithdan.com.